Welcome, juniors. Today is the time to read some poems that I hate. Okay, so it's in the book, and normally, if I don't like something, I just skip it. I mean, I don't always think that every little bit of literature has to be read that's in the book. We can easily cover pieces of it and leave some out and not make you miserable. But because of the historical importance of particularly Anne Bradstreet, I can't do that here. So we're gonna look at Anne Bradstreet and what's the other cat's name? It's Edward Taylor. Goodness, there's a lot of extra stuff. Yeah, Edward Taylor. So we're going to cover both of these people today. Going to look at a short poem by each of them, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Let's start by talking about what they're writing, and they're writing in something that I just don't enjoy at all, called Puritan plain style, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's plain. They're going to use the cool thing they do is they do use everyday objects kind of to have more meaning, which is where we get a little bit of the poetic nature. But to be honest with you, it doesn't sound very poetic because it's very direct and basic, and no frills, just like the Puritans believed life should be, which is great. Anne Bradstreet's a really cool person. I definitely feel that she would have been an activist if she was around today. She definitely she was a Puritan and she believed in the Puritan way, but you can tell there's a little bit going on underneath the surface with this woman. All right, I know nothing about Edward Taylor. We'll look at him when we get there. I just like to do these two poems together. So here we go. Let's get a start. I'm going to read this to you, and then we're going to look at each of the stanzas, okay? Because it's best to do poems in multiple readings. So here we go. To My Dear and Loving Husband by Anne Bradstreet. I guess I need glasses. All right, it says, if ever two were one, then surely we. If ever man were loved by wife, then thee. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me, ye women, if you can. I prize thy love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the east doth hold. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. Thy love is such I can no way repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. Then while we live in love, let's so persevere, that when we live no more, we may live ever. Okay, now, it's okay. I said I don't like these poems or I hate them, but they're just not my favorite. Okay, so let's talk about this right away. The first thing you want to do is you want to be able to paraphrase a poem, and this is a very short one. So if you were in class with me, we practiced this. We looked at, okay, what does the first stanza say, the second, and then the third. We looked at what they actually said, not try to interpret, okay? We really want to start without trying to interpret everything, okay? All right, let's see what she says in the first stanza. If ever two were one, then surely we. If ever man were loved by wife, then thee. Now, you look at those first two lines, and she's basically saying, definitely these two are like, they love each other. They're made for each other. The next two reinforce that. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me, ye women, if you can. All right? So that right there, we basically get that she loves her husband. He loves her. Great. All right? Second stanza. I prize thy love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the east doth hold. Now, right away we get, I love you more than all the riches in the world, okay? Really, not the strongest metaphor. Definitely overdone, although this was 400 years ago, so maybe we can't give them that much hate for that, right? My love is such that rivers cannot quench, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. So she's saying that my love is so it's so deep, there's not enough water in the rivers to quench her love. And then she points out, this is one of the weird lines for you, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. So I'm trying to find exactly what we I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with that line. Let's keep going. We'll put these together. Thy love is such I can no way repay. So she's basically saying, I love you so much and I care so much about your love that there's no compensation or repayment that can be offered for it. Okay? It's a weird phrase. I get that. All right, now, so far, the last stanza saves it, and a lot of times with poetry, that's what happens, okay? She says, the heavens reward thee manifold. Manifold is a word that says, it means many, okay? Manifold, I pray, then while we live in love, let's so persevere that when we live no more, we may live ever. In other words, she's saying, let's love so much that when we die, our love lives on, which seems like a paradox, right? When you're dead, you don't love anybody anymore. But here we are, 400 years later, still reading about this woman's love for this guy. So obviously, in a way, she has transcended time, and we still love her. We still love her. We still read about her, okay? And we still read about their love for each other. Okay, so, there you go. Pretty pretty basic. I mean, it's plain, but it is, you got to think at this time period, we're not, Bradstreet's got other stuff to do. She can't just sit around and dedicate herself to writing. She was not a full-time writer. She was a housewife. And the thing about in Puritan times, what went with that was a ton. All right. And really, to be honest with you, her poetry wasn't meant to be for everyone. She was kind of working through her feelings through her poems, something that we should do more. Maybe not through poems, because some of us, myself included, are not great at that, but through writing and being able to work through it. Because a lot of us keep all of our emotions bottled up, and the only way we know how to get them out is to go and talk to other people and cause all sorts of issues with that. But what she was doing was basically journaling to keep, get some of this out. All right, did she show it to other people? I'm sure. But the point here was this was personal. This was for her. This wasn't for public consumption at the time, okay? So there's that poem. Pretty basic, right? Not much else I can do with it. I would love to make this bigger than it is, but this is what Puritan poetry is, all right? Now, I'm going to go ahead. Instead of making two different videos, let's just ram these two together because I'm only 6 minutes in. Let's talk about, and man, I don't even know how to pronounce this word, housewifery. If you haven't guessed, it's the first time I've taught this one. American Lit for me this year is a new thing. I taught it back when I was teaching juniors in, oh goodness, I don't remember the year, but it was 12 years ago was the last time I taught it. So it's been a while since I broke it, and I didn't teach this one. So before we get into this, we're going to talk about a very, very popular thing in poetry, and that's a metaphor. Metaphor is just a figure of speech where two things that aren't the same are compared, all right? Technically, metaphor is an overarching term. Simile is a type of metaphor, but we really separate the two. But it's such a basic separation. Simile uses like or as to compare, metaphors don't. The real key with that, though, is when you say something is like something else, you're saying they're similar, that there's one or two things about them that match up. A metaphor is bigger. A metaphor is like, this is this, and we're going to go through it that way. So, in fact, this one uses an even more powerful metaphor called an extended metaphor, which means it goes on longer, but the fancy term, and this is what I want you to know, is the term conceit. All right, and in your book, the definition says a conceit, also called an extended metaphor, is a metaphor taken to its logical limit. So we're not just like leaving a description and going with it. We're dragging it out over multiple lines or an entire poem, in fact. Okay, so we're going to look at that as we get into this poem by Edward Taylor. All right, we're going to be on page 82 in your textbook. Okay, and I apologize if I squint a little bit. The teacher who had this before me. There we go. Wrote a lot in here, so, and not all of it's stuff that I'm going to go over. All right, so let's go. Let's read it one time through, and then we'll talk about it. It says, "Make me, O Lord, thy spinning wheel complete. Thy holy word my distaff make for me. Make mine affections thy swift flyers neat, and make my soul thy holy spool to be. My conversation take to be thy reel, and reel the yarn thereon spun of thy wheel. Make me thy loom, then knit therein this twine, and make thy Holy Spirit, Lord, wind quills, then weave the web thyself. The yarn is fine. Thine ordinances make my fulling mills, then dye the same in heavenly colors choice, all pinked with varnished flowers of paradise. Then clothe therewith mine understanding will, affection's judgment, conscience, memory, my words and actions that their shine may fill, my ways with glory, and thee glorify. Then mine apparel shall display before ye that I am clothed in holy robes for glory." Okay, there's some rhythm in there, but times it's not there. It's a little distended. It's got some other issues. It's definitely on a higher level of writing than what we saw from Anne Bradstreet, and it's a little more complex. So let's look at what is the extended metaphor here. Well, the writer, the speaker, let me back up. So writer and speaker aren't always the same person. The speaker here is saying that he's comparing himself to a spinning wheel. All right, so that's your extended metaphor. And he doesn't just say, "I'm like a spinning wheel." I mean, that could mean, he's round. All right, whatever. There's a lot of things you could do with this. And he spends the entire poem, all 15, 16, 17, 18 lines, going over how he's like that, and he takes it to all the logical limits. I'm like a spinning wheel, like this, and this, and it's amazing. It's really well done, okay? I'll give him credit for that, all right? So let's look at the first stanza. "Make me, O Lord, thy spinning wheel complete, thy holy word my distaff." By the way, that's just the staff on which the yarn is spun. So that's like the central pillar of it, and he's like, that'll be your word. That's the thing that all of the yarn, or what I'm going to spin, comes off of. Make mine affections thy swift flyers neat. And again, that's mine affections. Over the side here it says motions. So those emotions are going to tie all this yarn together. Make my soul thy holy spool to be, and my conversation make to that be thy reel, and reel the yarn there spun of thy wheel. So all of these things are contributing to making the yarn. Can I be honest with you? I don't know a thing about spinning yarn. So I don't know what all the pieces go with here, but I do know this. All these things are contributing is what he wants. He says, I want my emotions, your holy word, my soul, and my conversation to all contribute to this cloth we're making. That is obviously a metaphor for something else as well. So we get to the second part. He says, make me thy loom then. So now we're moving from a spinning yarn to a loom. Make me then thy loom, and knit therein this twine. Make thy Holy Spirit wind quills, then weave the web thyself. The yarn is fine. Thine ordinances make my fulling mills. Then dye the same in heavenly colors choice, all pink with varnished flowers of paradise. So again, all these different pieces going into making the cloth. So we've got ordinances, which are just the laws and sacraments and things like that. Got the Holy Spirit, God himself, all contributing to this. And then interestingly enough, and this is odd, they're dyeing the wool pink. Then it says pink. It's going to be decorated with a certain pattern with varnished flowers of paradise. This is very colorful. This is very ornate, very not Puritan. So that's an interesting choice. But I guess, make it black and white and boring gray just wasn't going to fit, okay? I mean, this does show a little bit of progressive thinking from the writer. Writers are the progressives a lot of the time, most of the time, okay? So you do see this little thing about, hey, beautiful things are okay. We don't all have to wear brown and miserable colors and be unhappy, all right? But I don't think that's his point. That's just a neat little throw in, all right? All right. Then he says, then clothe therewith mine understanding, will, affections, judgment, conscience, memory, my words and actions, that their shine may fill my ways with glory and be glorified. So he lists out all these different traits that should reflect God, or that, that the things we do, our emotions, how we judge things, our conscience, our memory, what we say and do, and they should all reflect God, that's kind of a neat way to end. He says, then mine apparel shall display before that I am clothed in holy robes. He's saying basically all of this clothing that he's talking about wearing will eventually translate to when he goes to heaven, and it's these robes of glory. This is much stronger than the Bradstreet poem. Now, I don't know anything about Edward Taylor. There's a little bit about him beforehand on page 81 if you'd like to look at it. But honestly, it's kind of an intense poem as far as for metaphor usage. Typically when we talk about conceits, we talk about something that comes later, a John Donne poem, but this one really does a great job with it as well. Let me see if there's anything really interesting that I'd like to add in. No, I think we're good on this one. Now, here's one of the questions I do want to broach just for you to think about. I'm not going to address it. But there's a couple of, there's so much useless stuff in this book, especially the teacher's edition. There are two things that were on your, or at least one was on your essential questions. The first comes from the Anne Bradstreet poem, and it was about what's more important, the public good or the individual identity. All right, and while the poem doesn't address that. The idea was that when she wrote her poems, they were for her. They really weren't for everyone else. But the fact is that what we're going to learn about literature is meant to involve community, and it should involve other people. So we're not just going to talk about whether literature is good. We're going to talk about in life in general. Should we care more about our own individuality and I know this sounds like I'm trying to feed you the answer. I'm not. Our own, individual identity, or should we care more about the group, the community? All right. Now, we're going to talk about that in class. Those of you that are just doing this from home, you're going to miss out on that part. I apologize. Hopefully, we'll get the recordings down where you can get some of the discussion in. But I'd like you to think about that and how you feel. The second one comes from this poem, Huswifery, which is about, and it's actually on page 82 near the bottom there. It says, do you think the Puritans would have considered this poem useful? And that's kind of one of the keys about the usefulness of literature in general. Is this something that Puritans would find to be wasteful, to be, you should spend your time tilling the fields or in prayer instead of writing this drivel? Is that the way they would feel? Or would they feel it's something useful? To go with that question, what do you think? Do you find poetry like this useful? Is this worth teaching, or is this something that we're teaching purely because of the historical value at this point? I believe you can argue for either of those, by the way. There is a reason to say these two poems are not great. They're just some of the only poetry we have from Americans at this time. So we chose to use them and put them in the book, and they've just been used over and over. So why change it now? The value of tradition. So maybe there's a purpose for them, maybe there's not. We're going to discuss that in class. I'm going to leave that up to you to also kind of think about, all right? And remember, one day you'll be in charge. If you think these shouldn't be there, you eventually will get the opportunity to make new rules for education and everyone else. So apologies to poor Ann Bradstreet and Edward Taylor, who it feels like I'm just dumping on right now. I'm not, I promise. I just... there's so much better stuff to be studying that's coming down the pipe, I promise you guys. But we still want to look at this. We want to kind of get our feet wet with poetry. And these are two good poems to do that. All right? Okay, I'm getting into this rambling thing I do because I don't know how to end. So I'm going to stop here. But thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this and finish it all the way through. Those of you who had me in class, I don't know why you're watching this again, but thank you for that, all right? So anyway, guys, take care. Have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow when we cover, what are we doing tomorrow? Oh, man, Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. That one will be fun. So we'll get on to that tomorrow. So be on the lookout. Anyway, guys, have a great night.